Hi, Connell McGuire, CEO of Warsaw Properties. So Warsaw Properties is a company that's been operating on the Polish market now for 20 years. So we're, let's say, a very experienced company helping private foreign investors mainly on the Polish residential market for many, many years now. We help with fit outs. When the fit outs are ready, the apartment is ready for rental. So a big part of the operations that we do on a daily basis is renting apartments for foreign investors and dealing with tenants on a daily basis, making sure that there's a good liaison between us and the tenants and between the tenant and the owner. So let me tell you a little bit about how the rental market works, what we do in order to get a tenant in place, what happens when the tenant is actually in the apartment, how do we manage the payments, how do we make sure that the tenant is a quality tenant. So first of all, when we get the apartment completely finished, it's fitted out, it's new, it's ready for rental, our letting team, they go to the apartment and do what we call home staging. So usually whether it be flowers or fruits, sometimes books, cushions, etc. We decorate the apartment a little bit to create a kind of a home feeling in the apartment. And then we take a photo shoot of the apartment, which we need for the advertisements. The main, let's say, source of tenants are Polish property portals. We advertise the apartments for rent on all the main property portals in Poland. We use social media also, but we find the most quality tenants come from property portals or from tenants who have recommended us to their colleagues, etc., and they come to us directly looking to rent apartments from us. When we start advertising, the phone starts ringing, emails start to arrive, and we get inquiries for the apartments. We arrange viewings for the potential tenants. Then we find a tenant who says, yes, fantastic, I really like the apartment, the price is okay, all the other conditions are fine, let's sign a rental contract. So the first thing we do is say, okay, we're very happy that you're interested in renting the apartment. However, we need to check a few things first, because somebody can be dressed very well, they can look beautiful, they can speak really well, etc. But we need to know what's behind all that. We need to know, are they really a good partner for the investor? Thankfully, over the past few years, the Polish residential rental market has professionalized a lot. So it's much easier to do a background check on potential tenants. We cooperate with a fantastic company which supports us and helps us in doing the background checks on the tenants. That process is done in 3 steps. The first step is we check the ID. We upload, or the tenant actually directly uploads their ID into the tenant verification software. And this software then checks that their ID or Polish ID or foreign passport, etc., matches the database of IDs, etc. So we know that it's a real ID. The second stage of the process is we check, does this potential tenant actually earn enough money to afford rentals in this apartment? We set the standard. So usually our standard is that the net income of a tenant has to be 2 times higher than the rent. And we actually don't get access to the tenant's bank accounts. We don't see their employment contract. This is all done by our, let's say, external party. So from the point of view of GDPR and data processing and security, that's all outsourced. The apartment owner is never at risk of exposing the data of the tenants, which is also something that owners never really think about that. But when you're renting an apartment, you're also responsible for the sensitive data that the tenant gives to you. So all this information is uploaded into this tenant verification software, and this software checks the bank account history. It verifies the labor contracts that the tenant might have with their employer, etc. So we get the full income and financial picture of the tenant. So that's stage 2. And stage 3 is we check the debt history. Does the tenant have any financial encumberment? This software also automatically checks all those systems and highlights if the tenant has any potential big debts that we need to worry about. Obviously, somebody can always have some parking ticket that they forgot about from years past, and we don't worry about little things like that. But we do worry about if we find that the tenant has a court case where they didn't pay their previous landlord for 6 months' rent, then that's a big issue. So the tenant verification program that we have is an excellent screening system. It's an excellent filter to get rid of bad apples or to highlight potential problematic tenants before we even sign an agreement with them. For sure, we would be able to rent apartments more quickly if we didn't check tenants so much, but we find that it's better to take even a little bit longer to rent an apartment, but then find a tenant who we're very happy with and who we can present to the apartment owner or to the investor and say, hey, we found a great tenant for your apartment, everything looks fantastic, and let's sign a rental agreement with this tenant. The rental agreements in Poland then are usually for 12 months. We don't like to sign rental agreements for 6 months or 9 months, etc. because what happens is that, time passes quickly. 6 months passes like that, and then your apartment is vacant again. When the apartment is vacant, you need to clean it, you need to start advertising, so all this takes time, it costs, and when your apartment is vacant, you're not earning any money. So we prefer 12-month contracts or longer. However, even if a tenant is coming to Poland, they know that they'll be working here for 4 years. They have a contract with the embassy. Very often, they don't sign a contract with you for 4 years, even though they're sure they will stay in Poland for 4 years. They sign a contract for 12 months, and after 12 months, they renew for another 12 months, and then they renew for another 12 months. Tenants like to keep that flexibility because, maybe they came here as a single person, maybe they met a very nice boy or a girl, 2 years later, maybe they had a child and they need a bigger apartment. So signing 12-month contracts gives them more flexibility if their life situation changes. Tenants, they prefer fitted out apartments. They don't come with sofas, they don't come with kitchens. We know exactly what should be in the apartment, what's going to be a deal breaker, what's not going to be a deal breaker. A deal breaker in the past would have been, there's no television in the apartment, I'm not moving into this apartment. Now, everybody consumes television and social media on their phone, on their laptop. They lie on their bed with their laptop, watch Netflix. They do the same on the sofa. People don't feel the need for televisions anymore. So that's never a deal breaker. When we're doing fit outs, we never have televisions as part of the fit outs. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, every fit out would have a television. So we try to follow the feedback from the tenants to make sure that the apartment is fitted out and prepared for the tenant's needs. Obviously, it's impossible to predict what every tenant wants. So we always tell the investors, look, be ready for some individual requests. Some tenant might arrive and say, hey, I love the apartment, everything is fantastic, here's all my data, you can check everything, and we find that the tenant is perfect, let's sign a contract. But then the tenant says, you know what, I'd really like an iron and an ironing board, or I'd like a vacuum cleaner, so maybe they want something extra. And then we go back to the owner and we say, hey, the tenant wants to sign, we recommend signing, he's agreed with the rental price, everything is great, 12-month contract, however, they want a vacuum cleaner. And very often the investors say, yeah, no problem, get a vacuum cleaner and let's sign the contract. So the tenant is in the apartment, and the question is then, what securities do we have that we know that, or we don't know that the tenant will always pay the rent? So the first security is that in Poland, it's standard to pay the equivalent of 1 month's rent as a deposit for the apartment when you're signing the 12-month rental agreement. So we know that we will always have 1 month's rent as coverage for non-payment of rent or for any damages maybe that were done when the tenant was in place. However, as I mentioned before, the Polish rental market is getting more and more professional, and we cooperate with one of the biggest insurance companies in Central and Eastern Europe. We have a fantastic insurance product that is specially designed for landlords who are renting as private people to individual tenants, and this insurance package that they provide covers up to 9,000 zloty on a 12-month rental agreement. So on the Polish market, 9,000 zloty, the average rent is maybe 3,000 zloty per month. So let's say you're covered for 3 months of non-rental payment by the tenant, plus you have another month's rent as a deposit. So in fact, on a 12-month contract in Poland, you can be covered for up to 4 months of non-payment from the tenant. So it's a really, let's say, secure and safe market here in Poland for rentals. Tenants are real people, yeah? Even if we do full verification, we get a deposit, we have the insurance package, we could have a fantastic tenant, they lose their job, they get a serious illness, they have an accident, life happens to everybody. So the tip is, again, don't be your own worst enemy. Be prepared for things you're not prepared for. Be prepared for a telephone call that the tenant had an accident or that the tenant lost their job, we engage on your behalf with the tenant and we will negotiate the best conditions. Don't be inflexible, be flexible with the tenant. Use our experience to help you get the best from your rental product here in Poland. Also, don't be too ambitious with rents. We have so many investors who look at the market and come to us and say, hey, I saw an advertisement for this rent. Say, okay, so you found that 1, 2, 3 people want really high rent for their apartment. We can try and rent it at that price. However, you have to make a decision whether you want your apartment rented at a market rent or you want to really try and push for the highest rent possible, and you could have your apartment empty for 1 week, for 3 weeks, for 4 weeks, trying to get a really high rent, but with no guarantee that someone will come and pay you that rent. Your apartment is an investment only when it's making money for you, only when it's rented. Trying to, let's say, push and be aggressive, etc. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I know from experience that I would say 80% of the time it doesn't. Listen to the advice of your local advisors, listen to your property manager, listen to your letting agent, etc. If you see that you wanted to rent at a high price and nothing is happening, don't be stubborn, don't wait, just get your apartment rented. Listen to the feedback, get a tenant in there, because then your apartment could be rented for 2, 3, 4 years if you get that good tenant in place. The typical tenant in Poland are people who are starting in life. You have this built into your head that someday I want my own apartment, I want my own house, I'll get a mortgage, I'll buy. So the rental market in Poland it's about young people who are maybe they're studying, maybe they're finished studying, they're starting life as a young professional in one of the big cities. They are saving maybe for their first mortgage. It's a young couple. It's that age of 20 to 35, which is the bulk of the market. And then you have the expatriates, the foreign professionals who are coming here, working for multinational companies. Sometimes they come alone, sometimes they come along with their whole families. 80% of the rental market are studios and 1-bedroom apartments. So even if somebody has a budget to buy a 2-bedroom apartment or a 3-bedroom apartment, the best advice I can give them is take that budget, divide it in 2 and buy 2 studios or 2 1-bedroom apartments, because if your tenant moves out of a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom apartment, your apartment is empty and you have no income for that period. If you buy 2 studios and one of your tenant moves out, you still have income from the other studio, which will cover the maintenance costs and management costs of the vacant apartment while it's still vacant. If in the future you decided, hey, I would like to buy an apartment in a different country, in a different city, you can maybe sell one of the apartments that you bought, but still keep the other one. So you're much more flexible in terms of liquidity, in terms of decision making, etc. So I would always say buy more smaller apartments than one big beautiful penthouse with a big balcony on the top floor, etc. Sure, it's great to own such an apartment, but there are much fewer tenants for properties like that. They're more expensive to rent and not everybody can afford them. So have a realistic rent and your apartment will always be rented and it will always sell in the future. Keep it simple and listen to your advisors when purchasing the apartment and you're looking for tenants and planning fit outs, etc.